Ma'am, step away from the ATM and keep your hands where I can see them. The command cut through the quiet night like a crack across glass. Vanessa Brooks froze, her fingers still resting on the edge of the machine as the bright screen reflected against her face. For a moment, she thought she had misheard. The parking lot outside the small neighborhood bank was nearly empty. A warm summer breeze drifted across the pavement. Somewhere in the distance, traffic hummed along the interstate. Nothing about the evening felt unusual until she turned and saw the patrol car. Blue lights pulsed silently across the brick wall of the bank, painting everything in flashes of color. Officer Ethan Cole stepped out, one hand resting near his duty belt, his expression already hardened. Vanessa blinked. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked calmly. Ethan didn't answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the ATM screen. More specifically, on the balance displayed across it. $3,147,882.61. The numbers glowed in bright green against the darkness. Ethan stared at them for a second longer than necessary. Then his gaze shifted back to Vanessa. She wore a simple gray coat despite the mild weather. Her purse was worn but neat. There were no designer labels. No luxury vehicle parked nearby. No visible signs of wealth. Nothing that matched the figure on the screen. Across the street, a man standing beside a gas pump lowered his phone and watched. Another customer exiting the convenience store slowed his pace. Curiosity traveled quickly in small towns. Vanessa noticed the stares immediately. She also noticed the subtle change in Ethan's posture. He had already made a decision. "I'm going to need some identification," he said. Vanessa reached slowly into her purse and handed him her driver's license. Ethan glanced at it briefly before looking up again. "Vanessa Brooks." "That's correct." He looked back at the ATM. "That account belongs to you?" Vanessa frowned slightly. "Yes." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's a lot of money." Vanessa offered a polite smile. "I suppose it is." The answer seemed to irritate him. A silence settled over the parking lot. The ATM emitted a soft electronic beep. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly. Everything felt strangely still. Ethan looked at the screen again, then at Vanessa, then back to the screen. It was as if his mind refused to connect the two. "How exactly did you come into that kind of money?" he asked. Vanessa's smile faded. "Officer, is there a reason you're asking me that? I asked you a question, and I'm asking whether I'm legally required to answer it." Ethan's expression hardened further. The bystanders were openly watching now. One person lifted a phone. Vanessa noticed, but said nothing. She simply stood there beneath the glow of the ATM canopy, calm and composed. Ethan shifted his weight. Something about her confidence bothered him. Most people became nervous when confronted by a police officer. Vanessa looked almost disappointed. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "people don't just walk around with $3 million in a checking account." Vanessa held his gaze. "Some people do." For a brief moment, neither spoke. The summer air felt heavier. Across the parking lot, the gas station customer began recording. Ethan noticed. So did Vanessa. But only one of them seemed concerned. Then Ethan took a step closer and said the words that would change both of their lives before the night was over. "I think we need to have a much longer conversation about where that money came from." Vanessa studied Ethan for a moment, the same way she had studied witnesses, defendants, and attorneys across countless courtrooms. She had spent years learning how to read people. Fear usually revealed itself quickly. So did confidence. Ethan carried both, though he seemed unaware of it. The confidence sat on the surface. The fear hid deeper. It showed itself in the way his eyes kept returning to the ATM screen, searching for confirmation of something he had already decided must be true. The blue lights from the patrol car continued flashing across the bank windows. Their reflection moved across the glass like slow waves. Vanessa slipped her bank card back into her purse and closed it carefully. "Officer, am I free to leave?" she asked. Ethan folded his arms. "Not yet." "Am I being detained?" The question landed harder than he expected. Several people standing nearby exchanged glances. One of them lowered his phone for a second before raising it again. Ethan shifted his stance. "I am conducting an investigation." Vanessa nodded slowly. "What crime are you investigating?" The question was simple. The answer was not. Ethan opened his mouth, then paused. The silence stretched longer than he intended. "Suspicious activity," he finally said. Vanessa's expression remained calm. "What activity?" Another pause. The fluorescent light above the ATM buzzed softly. Somewhere beyond the parking lot, a train horn echoed through the darkness. Ethan could feel the attention of every person watching. He disliked being questioned, especially in public. The amount of money in that account raises concerns. Vanessa looked toward the ATM screen. The machine had already returned to its welcome page. The balance was gone. Only the memory remained. Having money is not a crime, she said quietly. Ethan's jaw tightened. That depends on where it came from. Vanessa folded her hands in front of her. Her voice never rose. Then perhaps you should have evidence before assuming it came from somewhere improper. A few feet away, the customer from the gas station nodded slightly. Another woman standing near the entrance of the bank frowned, as if beginning to see the conversation differently. Ethan noticed both reactions. They irritated him. This situation was slipping away from the narrative he had created in his head. He glanced down at Vanessa's driver's license again. Her address was local. Her record showed no warrants, no alerts, no criminal history, nothing unusual. Yet something continued bothering him. He looked at the modest coat she wore, the practical handbag, the older sedan parked beneath a streetlight at the edge of the lot. None of it matched what he believed a millionaire should look like. "What do you do for a living?" he asked. Vanessa almost smiled. "I work in public service." The answer only deepened his suspicion. Public service certainly did not explain millions of dollars. At least not in Ethan's mind. What kind of public service? Vanessa tilted her head slightly. Does that matter? Ethan looked around at the growing audience. The parking lot no longer felt empty. Curiosity had drawn people closer. Some pretended to check their phones while listening. Others stood openly watching. The warm night air carried the smell of gasoline and fresh-cut grass from a nearby median. "I asked you a question," Ethan said. Vanessa met his eyes without hesitation. "And I have answered every question I am legally required to answer." The words were polite, respectful, yet they seemed to strike a nerve. Ethan took a slow breath. Something about her composure felt almost unsettling. Most people became defensive under pressure. Vanessa seemed completely at ease, as if she already knew how this conversation would end. And for reasons he could not explain, that realization made him even more determined not to let her walk away. The tension in the parking lot thickened almost imperceptibly. What had begun as a routine stop outside a neighborhood bank now felt like something larger, something neither Vanessa nor Ethan seemed willing to abandon. Ethan glanced toward his patrol car and reached for the radio clipped to his shoulder. The movement drew more attention from the small crowd gathering near the sidewalk. A delivery driver leaned against his van. A middle-aged couple paused beside their pickup truck. Even the cashier from the convenience store had stepped outside to watch. Vanessa remained exactly where she was. Calm, patient, almost impossibly composed. Ethan pressed the radio button. "Dispatch, this is Officer Cole. Requesting a records check and supervisor availability." The reply crackled through the speaker a few seconds later. "Copy that, Officer Cole." Vanessa listened quietly. The blue lights reflected across her eyes as she looked toward the dark sky. Thick summer clouds drifted above the town, dimming the stars. The night air felt warmer than before. Ethan lowered the radio. "Until I receive clarification, I would appreciate your cooperation." Vanessa nodded once. "I have been cooperating." "Then answer my questions directly." "I have answered every lawful question you have asked." The distinction was subtle, but Ethan noticed it immediately. So did several people standing nearby. One young man lowered his phone and exchanged a glance with his friend. The conversation no longer sounded like an investigation. It sounded like a debate. Ethan felt control slipping away and disliked the feeling. "You seem very familiar with legal procedure," he said. Vanessa folded her arms lightly. "Most professionals are familiar with the rules governing their work." "And what profession would that be?" Vanessa looked at him for a moment. Her expression remained unreadable. "Public service." Ethan exhaled through his nose. The same answer. The same calm tone. It felt almost deliberate now. Behind him, the patrol car's computer screen glowed faintly through the windshield. The radio chirped again. Dispatch was still processing the records request. The wait irritated him. Vanessa, however, appeared entirely unbothered. In fact, she seemed more concerned about the time than the confrontation. She glanced briefly at her watch. A simple silver watch. Nothing flashy. Nothing expensive. Yet somehow Ethan found himself studying every detail about her. searching for evidence that supported his assumptions. The problem was that every new detail seemed to create more questions than answers. Her driver's license was clean. Her vehicle registration was current. Her record showed nothing suspicious. Yet the image of that ATM balance refused to leave his mind. More than $3 million. He simply could not reconcile it. A sudden beep came from his radio. Officer Cole, records check complete. No warrants. No active investigations. No alerts. Ethan stared at the device. Copy. The dispatcher continued. Subject appears clear. Several seconds passed. The crowd seemed to sense the shift immediately. People who had expected some dramatic discovery instead heard confirmation that nothing was wrong. Vanessa remained silent. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply waited. That somehow frustrated Ethan even more. Then another voice came across the radio, deeper and more authoritative. Officer Cole, Sergeant Mitchell, is en route. Estimated arrival 2 minutes. Ethan looked up. Vanessa met his eyes. Neither spoke. In the distance, headlights appeared at the far end of the road, slowly approaching the bank parking lot. Whatever happened next, the situation was no longer his alone. The approaching headlights rolled slowly into the parking lot and came to a stop beside Ethan's patrol car. The engine shut off. A moment later, Sergeant Daniel Mitchell stepped out of a dark police SUV. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s with silver hair and the steady expression of someone who had spent decades navigating difficult situations. The crowd parted slightly as he walked toward the ATM. His eyes moved from Ethan to Vanessa and then briefly to the people recording with their phones. He immediately understood that whatever had happened here had already attracted attention. Officer Cole, he said calmly. Bring me up to speed. Ethan straightened. Suspicious financial activity, Sergeant. Subject was observed accessing an account containing more than $3 million. I initiated contact to determine the legitimacy of the funds. Mitchell glanced toward Vanessa. And what evidence suggests the funds are illegitimate? Ethan hesitated. It was only for a second, but several people noticed. The circumstances appeared unusual. Mitchell folded his arms. Unusual is not a crime. The words landed heavily. Ethan felt heat rise into his face. Vanessa remained silent. She simply watched the exchange unfold beneath the pale glow of the bank lights. Mitchell turned toward her. Ma'am, I am Sergeant Mitchell. Have you been cooperative with Officer Cole? Vanessa nodded politely. Yes, Sergeant. Have you refused any lawful requests? No, sir. Mitchell studied her for a moment. There was something familiar about her composure. Not her face, not her voice, her presence. She carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to responsibility, someone accustomed to being heard. Yet he could not place it. Ethan stepped forward. Sergeant, with respect, there is still the issue of the account balance. Mitchell looked at him. The account balance itself is not evidence of wrongdoing. Ethan opened his mouth, but stopped. Around them, the crowd had grown quieter. The atmosphere had shifted. Earlier, curiosity had fueled the gathering. Now people seemed to be evaluating the officers themselves. Mitchell noticed it too. He turned back toward Vanessa. Would you mind telling me what line of work you are in? Vanessa looked at him and smiled faintly. Public service. Ethan exhaled sharply. The same answer again. Mitchell, however, did not react the way Ethan expected. Instead, he nodded slowly as if considering something. A breeze swept through the parking lot, rustling a row of small trees near the edge of the property. The leaves whispered softly in the darkness. Mitchell's radio crackled. A dispatcher's voice emerged through static. Sergeant Mitchell, headquarters is requesting a status update regarding the call at First Community Bank. Mitchell reached for the radio. Before he could respond, another voice interrupted the dispatcher. It was a woman speaking quickly from somewhere inside headquarters. Stand by. I need confirmation on the identity of the individual involved. Mitchell frowned. The interruption was unusual. Very unusual. He looked down at Vanessa's driver's license, which Ethan had handed him moments earlier. His eyes settled on the name again. Vanessa Brooks. Something stirred in the back of his memory. Not recognition exactly. More like the feeling that he should know why that name mattered. Across the parking lot, the flashing blue lights reflected off the bank windows. The crowd waited. Ethan waited. Vanessa waited. Then Mitchell's radio crackled once more, and the moment the next voice spoke, the entire direction of the night began to change. The voice coming through Sergeant Mitchell's radio was crisp and unmistakably urgent. "Sergeant, headquarters needs clarification immediately. Did you say the individual involved is Vanessa Brooks?" Mitchell raised the radio closer. "That is correct." A brief silence followed. Not static, not interference. The kind of silence that happens when someone on the other end suddenly realizes the situation is far more serious than expected. Then the voice returned. "Sergeant, do not take any further action. I repeat, do not take any further action until Captain Reynolds arrives." Mitchell's brow furrowed. Ethan looked confused. The crowd exchanged curious glances. Vanessa remained perfectly still. The summer wind lifted a few strands of hair near her face before settling again. Ethan stepped closer to Mitchell. "What is going on?" Mitchell did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked down once more at the driver's license in his hand. Vanessa Brooks. The name finally connected with a memory buried beneath years of meetings, briefings, and public announcements. His eyes widened slightly. Across town, he had seen that name on official documents, news reports, and courthouse announcements. Suddenly, the calm confidence, the knowledge of procedure, and the complete absence of fear all made sense. Ethan noticed the change in his supervisor's expression. "Sergeant." Mitchell looked toward Vanessa. "Ma'am, have we met before?" Vanessa smiled politely. "I believe we have attended some of the same public safety meetings." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. The answer sounded ordinary, but Mitchell's reaction was not. Before he could ask another question, another vehicle entered the parking lot. This one moved much faster than the others had. A black government SUV rolled beneath the bank lights and stopped near the entrance. The engine shut off. The driver's door opened. Captain Laura Reynolds stepped out. She was normally composed, but tonight she crossed the pavement with unusual speed. Every officer in the county knew her reputation. She did not rush unless something truly mattered. The crowd immediately sensed the shift. Phones lifted higher. Conversations stopped. Even Ethan stood a little straighter. Captain Reynolds approached Mitchell first. "Sergeant." Then her eyes moved directly to Vanessa. Her entire expression changed. Respect replaced urgency. "Good evening, Ms. Brooks." Ethan felt the ground disappear beneath his assumptions. He looked from the captain to Vanessa and back again. The captain extended her hand. Vanessa accepted it warmly. "I apologize for the inconvenience this evening," Reynolds said. The words landed like a thunderclap in the silence. Several bystanders exchanged shocked looks. Ethan stared. He could not remember the last time he had heard a police captain apologize to someone during an active investigation. Mitchell lowered his gaze slightly. The pieces were falling into place now. Ethan was still trying to assemble them. "Captain," he said carefully, "who exactly is she?" Reynolds turned toward him. For a moment, the flashing blue lights reflected across her face. Then she answered, "Officer Cole, this is Vanessa Brooks." Ethan waited. Reynolds continued, "The elected district attorney for this county." The parking lot went completely silent. Even the distant traffic seemed to disappear. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The words hung in the warm night air. Vanessa did not say a single thing. She did not need to. For the first time since arriving at the ATM, Ethan realized he knew almost nothing about the woman standing in front of him. And the realization hit harder than any accusation ever could. The silence lingered long after Captain Reynolds spoke. The crowd that had gathered outside the bank remained frozen beneath the glow of the parking lot lights. Some people continued recording. Others simply stared. The revelation had changed everything. Yet Vanessa stood exactly as she had from the beginning of the evening. Calm, unshaken, composed. The flashing blue lights reflected softly across the pavement, turning puddles of recent rain into shifting pools of color. Ethan felt every eye in the parking lot drift toward him. Just minutes earlier, he had believed he understood the situation. Now he was not sure he understood any part of it. Captain Reynolds folded her hands in front of her. "Officer Cole, I think it would be appropriate to conclude this encounter." Ethan swallowed. The words were professional, but the meaning behind them was impossible to miss. He glanced toward Vanessa. She did not look angry. That somehow made him feel worse. If she had shouted or argued, he would have known how to respond. Instead, she offered him nothing except quiet patience. Sergeant Mitchell shifted his weight and looked toward the crowd. Several people began dispersing now that the mystery had been solved. The delivery driver returned to his van. The couple climbed into their pickup truck. Even the young man recording lowered his phone and slowly walked away. The excitement was fading. What remained was something much heavier. Reflection. Vanessa looked toward the bank entrance where a faint yellow light glowed through the glass doors. For a moment, she seemed far away, lost in thought. The warm summer breeze moved through the trees again, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass from a nearby median. The night suddenly felt quieter than before. Captain Reynolds stepped beside Vanessa. "I am truly sorry for what happened tonight." Vanessa nodded politely. "Thank you, Captain. If you wish to file a formal complaint, the department will fully cooperate." Vanessa did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked across the parking lot toward Ethan. The officer stood beneath the flashing lights of his patrol car, his shoulders noticeably lower than they had been earlier. The confidence that had fueled his certainty was gone. In its place sat something more human. Uncertainty. Vanessa had seen that expression before. She had seen it on witnesses who realized they had judged someone unfairly. She had seen it on jurors who discovered a story was more complicated than they first believed. Most of all, she had seen it on people forced to confront assumptions they never knew they carried. The courthouse had taught her many lessons over the years. One of the most important was that mistakes often revealed more about a person than success ever could. Ethan finally looked up. Their eyes met across the parking lot. Neither spoke. The moment lasted only a few seconds, yet it felt much longer. The noise of traffic drifted from the highway in the distance. Somewhere a dog barked. A neon sign flickered above the convenience store across the street. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary moments. Yet the atmosphere felt strangely significant. Vanessa slowly exhaled. The tension that had filled the evening seemed to dissolve into the warm night air. She reached for her purse and adjusted the strap on her shoulder. Then she looked once more at the people around her, the officers, the captain, the quiet bank behind them. And for the first time all night, a faint expression of sadness crossed her face. Not sadness for herself. Sadness for how quickly appearances had been allowed to become evidence in someone's mind. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The parking lot seemed suspended in time beneath the glow of streetlights and the fading flash of emergency lights. Then Captain Reynolds glanced toward Sergeant Mitchell and gave a small nod. The signal was subtle, but Mitchell understood immediately. He stepped closer to Ethan. "Walk with me for a minute." Ethan followed without protest. They moved a short distance away, near the edge of the parking lot where a row of maple trees swayed gently in the warm night breeze. The crowd had mostly dispersed now. Only a few people remained, lingering out of curiosity. Mitchell folded his arms and looked back toward Vanessa. She stood beside the bank entrance, speaking quietly with Captain Reynolds. "Do you know why this situation concerns me?" Mitchell asked. Ethan stared at the pavement. "Because I made the department look bad." Mitchell shook his head. "No." Ethan looked up. "Then what?" The older officer remained silent for a moment. His face reflected years of experience, years of seeing people at their best and worst. "Because you stopped looking for facts and started looking for confirmation." Ethan frowned slightly. Mitchell continued. "You saw a number on a screen. Then you built an entire story around it." Ethan wanted to argue, but the words never came. Deep down, he knew the sergeant was right. Every assumption now seemed painfully obvious. Mitchell sighed. "You know what bothers me most?" Ethan shook his head. "She gave you opportunities all night." The younger officer looked confused. Mitchell pointed toward Vanessa. "She asked if she was being detained. She asked what crime you were investigating. She gave you chances to slow down and think." Ethan looked across the parking lot. Vanessa was laughing softly at something Captain Reynolds had said. There was no bitterness in her expression, no visible anger, just quiet dignity. Somehow that made the lesson feel even heavier. Back near the bank entrance, Captain Reynolds and Vanessa had moved beneath the building's canopy where the fluorescent lights cast a soft glow across the sidewalk. "You handled that remarkably well," Reynolds said. Vanessa smiled faintly. "I have had practice." Reynolds nodded, though the answer carried more weight than the words themselves. Vanessa glanced toward Ethan and Mitchell in the distance. "Do you know something ironic?" Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "What is that?" Vanessa folded her arms lightly. "Tomorrow morning, I am scheduled to present recommendations regarding officer training and community trust." Reynolds stared for a moment before letting out a quiet breath. "You are kidding." Vanessa shook her head. "I wish I were." For a second, both women stood silently beneath the lights. The irony was impossible to ignore. The evening had become a living example of the very issues Vanessa had been studying for months. Reynolds looked toward Ethan again. He does not know that, does he? No. Vanessa's voice remained gentle. Not yet. Across the parking lot, Ethan watched them from a distance. Something about their conversation unsettled him. Not because he feared punishment. That concern seemed almost insignificant now. What unsettled him was the growing realization that this encounter had never truly been about money. It had never been about an ATM screen. It had never been about an account balance. Those had only been symptoms of something deeper. A judgment made before facts existed. A conclusion reached before questions were finished. The realization settled over him like a weight. Then Captain Reynolds called his name. Her voice carried clearly through the warm summer air. Ethan straightened and began walking toward her, unaware that the next few minutes would reveal an even bigger truth about why Vanessa Brooks had become one of the most respected public servants in the entire county. Captain Reynolds waited until Ethan reached the bank entrance before speaking. The parking lot had grown quieter now. Most of the bystanders had left, taking their curiosity with them. Only the distant hum of traffic and the soft rustle of leaves remained. The flashing lights from the patrol vehicles had been turned off, leaving the area bathed in the steady glow of street lamps and fluorescent fixtures. Ethan stopped a few feet from Vanessa. For the first time all evening, he seemed unsure what to say. Reynolds looked between them. "Officer Cole, there is something you should know." Ethan nodded silently. Reynolds glanced at Vanessa before continuing. "For the last 6 months, Ms. Brooks has been leading a countywide review of community trust and officer decision-making." Ethan frowned slightly. "A review?" Vanessa answered this time. "A study of how assumptions influence interactions." Ethan felt a chill despite the warm night air. Reynolds continued. "Departments throughout the county have participated. Training programs, field reports, citizen feedback, body camera reviews. The goal is simple: improve trust before problems become larger." Ethan stared at Vanessa. The irony was impossible to miss now. What had happened tonight sounded eerily similar to the very issues they were discussing. Vanessa nodded as if she could see the realization forming in his mind. "Most people think bias always looks dramatic," she said quietly. "Often it does not. Sometimes it looks like certainty before evidence." The words were calm. There was no accusation in them. That somehow made them more powerful. Ethan looked away for a moment. Across the parking lot, his patrol car sat beneath the lights, ordinary and still. He thought about every step of the evening. The ATM screen, the balance, the assumptions, the questions he never asked, the answers he never considered. One memory replayed louder than the others. Vanessa asking what crime he was investigating. At the time, he had believed he was being challenged. Now he understood she had been offering him an opportunity to stop and think. Reynolds folded her hands. "Do you know why I came personally tonight?" Ethan shook his head. "Because when headquarters heard the name Vanessa Brooks, everyone knew who she was. Not because of her title, because of her reputation." Ethan looked back toward Vanessa. Reynolds smiled faintly. 3 years ago, she helped secure funding for youth outreach programs that reduced juvenile crime across the county. Last year, she worked with law enforcement to expand training resources. Half the initiatives we use today exist because she fought for them. Ethan listened in silence. Each sentence seemed to make the evening feel heavier. Vanessa looked almost uncomfortable hearing her accomplishments discussed. "None of that matters tonight," she said softly. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "I disagree." Vanessa shook her head. "The point is not who I am. The point is that nobody should need a title before they are treated fairly." The words settled into the quiet night. No one spoke afterward. Ethan felt something shift inside him. All evening he had been focused on the account balance, then on the title, then on the consequences. Now, for the first time, he understood the deeper lesson. The mistake had begun long before he learned who Vanessa Brooks was. It had begun the moment he decided he already knew enough. Vanessa looked at him and offered a small, genuine smile. Not a victorious smile, not a judgmental one. Simply the smile of someone who still believed people were capable of learning. And somehow, that act of grace left a deeper impression than anything else that had happened that night. The last of the patrol vehicles departed a few minutes later, their taillights fading into the darkness beyond the intersection. The parking lot slowly returned to what it had been before the evening began. Quiet, ordinary, almost peaceful. Captain Reynolds exchanged a few final words with Vanessa before heading back toward her SUV. Sergeant Mitchell followed shortly afterward, leaving only Ethan and Vanessa beneath the soft glow of the bank lights. For a moment, neither spoke. The air felt lighter now. The tension that had dominated the night had finally dissolved. Across the street, the convenience store clerk locked the front door and switched off one of the neon signs. The bright red glow disappeared, leaving only the gentle yellow light from the bank entrance. Ethan looked down at the pavement before finally speaking. "I owe you an apology." Vanessa listened quietly. "Not because of your title," Ethan continued, "and not because of your position. I owe you an apology because I stopped being objective." The honesty in his voice surprised even him. Vanessa studied him for a moment. The young officer standing before her now seemed very different from the man who had first approached the ATM. Not because his uniform had changed, because his certainty had. "Thank you," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "I keep replaying the night in my head. Every question, every assumption. I thought I was doing my job." Vanessa smiled gently. Most people who make mistakes believe the same thing. The answer carried no bitterness, only understanding. Ethan let out a slow breath. "Will there be a complaint?" Vanessa glanced toward the empty parking lot. The bank windows reflected the streetlights like mirrors. "There could be." Ethan nodded. "I understand." Another quiet moment passed. Then Vanessa looked back at him. "Tell me something, Officer Cole." "Yes, ma'am." "What would you have done differently if the ATM balance had belonged to a man wearing an expensive suit?" Ethan froze. The question was simple. The answer was not. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Eventually, he lowered his gaze. That was answer enough. Vanessa nodded slightly. That is where growth begins. Ethan felt the weight of the lesson settle into place. Not as punishment, not as humiliation, as clarity, the kind that arrives only after pride leaves the room. Vanessa adjusted the strap of her purse and glanced at her watch. It was late. Tomorrow would come early. Court hearings, community meetings, another day serving the county she had dedicated her life to protecting. "There is something else you should know," she said. Ethan looked up. "The recommendations I present tomorrow are not about discipline." He seemed surprised. "They are not." Vanessa shook her head. "They are about training. Better questions, better listening, better judgment. Communities are stronger when people learn, not when they are simply punished." Ethan stared at her. In that moment, he finally understood why so many people respected her. It was not the office she held. It was the principles she carried. Vanessa extended her hand. After a brief hesitation, Ethan shook it. Her grip was steady, confident, human, nothing more, nothing less. Then she turned and walked toward her sedan parked beneath the streetlight at the edge of the lot. The night breeze moved gently through the trees as she opened the door and settled into the driver's seat. Ethan remained where he was, watching silently. The engine started. Headlights illuminated the empty pavement ahead. Slowly, the car pulled away and disappeared onto the quiet road. Ethan stood alone beneath the fading glow of the parking lot lights. No crowd remained. No flashing lights. No cameras. Only silence. And somewhere within that silence was a lesson far more valuable than the number that had first appeared on a screen. As the warm summer wind drifted through the trees, he finally understood that true justice begins the moment a person stops assuming they already know the whole story.